There's a song that is checked. There's an Easter egg almost. And eventually, I don't know if people will find it, but it's a guitar part that is from the first record. And I will look forward to seeing if people pick it out. That is in the song The Flood. And it's from that record. And if they pick out what song it is, it'll be amazing. And it's also got one that's from this record.
Hey everybody, today is a very special episode for me because I am chatting with the one and only Travis Stever, guitarist of Coheed and Cambria and LS Dunes. I have been an enormous Coheed fan since 2003. That was the year my friends Charlie and Jeff Witt first showed me the album In Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3, and it remains one of my all-time favorite albums, inspired many a jam session on guitar, and made me a fan for life. Crucial to the band's sound is, of course, Travis's guitar style, both his super expressive leads and solos, and his riffs, alongside the band's conceptual mastermind, Claudio Sanchez. I was lucky enough to get a super early listen to Coheed's excellent new album, The Father of Make-Believe, which is out March 14th. It has some of the band's most aggressive material in quite a long time, and some stuff that goes in the complete opposite direction. I think hardcore fans are going to eat it up. This chat was so comprehensive, so interesting, that I felt it was best to split it in half, and even include some super deep cut stuff over at my Patreon, so subscribers can check that out too. But in this first installment, Travis and I are going to focus on his record collection, everything from Genesis to Outcast. In the second installment, Travis is going to talk a bit more about the new album, and even highlight some songs and guitar parts that reference specific bands or songs that he loves. Without further ado, please allow him to introduce himself.
The cool thing about my collection is it is big, but it's not massive by any means compared to a lot of my friends that collect records. You know, I have people that have shelf after shelf, like looks like a library, but I mean, I don't know how many this is, but it's quite a few. But what I've done is, and I'm still working on it to a degree, but like at least with the standby records, I've tried to center on everything being an important record to me, you know? Even with new records, I gotta really love it to buy it on vinyl. I mean, with new records, I do like to support the artist, and I will get the record, like a record like Fontaine DC, like their new record. I like that enough so that I'll buy it on vinyl, right? And there's certain records like that. But for the most part, a lot of the classic records I have are just, they gotta be what I really loved. I have this like OCD kind of crazy rule where I'm not going beyond this shelf.
No, that's a good rule to have. Actually, I need to abide by that. My problem is I have too many
No, you
shelves.
should abide by it. People should have all their different ways. Like, I just feel like if I had another shelf this size, I'm gonna go nuts with it,
Yeah.
And then there's gonna be no cap for me.
No, sometimes you need restrictions in art and in life and in everything in order to like find your way through it, I think.
Yeah, I need restrictions.
What is the first album that you either bought with your own money or someone gave you as a gift? Like, I don't know if you have it, that's awesome, but
I
what's the
do.
first album that's like to
First
be
album
yours?
that I ever bought with my own money. Now, this isn't the first album. So my parents had a lot of vinyl records still when I was born. I was born in '78. So there was a collection of vinyl, but cassettes were already part of their lives. They didn't have 8 tracks anymore. They had vinyl and cassettes. And my father had started, he had a cassette player in his van and stuff. So I had 3 cassettes that I loved when I was born. And I have all those on vinyl, of course. And I carried around a little Fisher Price boombox. And I had Beatles Abbey Road, The Police, Synchronicity, and I had Christopher Cross Sailing. Those were
Man,
my 3 tapes that I carried around. And of course, I have those on vinyl. Now, the first record that I bought with my own money, okay,
Yes.
was just a couple of years later. So I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and it was Iron Maiden, Somewhere in Time.
Nice.
So that's right here. Now, I didn't even really know Iron Maiden's music. I just look at this cover. What
Can
it
you
does,
hold that even a little closer? That is such a great cover. It's like
what
one of
it does
the
with a
best.
kid's mind to see that, futuristic and the back with the band there,
Oh,
and
it's
just
so good.
and so it was like this just took my young mind on a journey right away, and I didn't care what it sounded like. I got home, I listened, I was like, this is so cool. My stepbrother comes in, he goes, those guys are devil worshippers, and that they did a seance to this exact record, and like then a bunch of kids that live close to me did a seance with the record, and their house burnt down. Took the record immediately, put it back in my mom's collection next to that Black Sabbath record that I was obsessed with the witch on it, so
Yeah.
that it could be in the living room and away from me. And I didn't return to that record or the Black Sabbath record for about a year and a half, and then I was obsessed with them.
Oh
You know what I'm
man.
saying? And then I embraced metal as a child. So probably about 9 or 10, I was able to be not petrified that Satan was going to come through the record and tell me to kill everybody.
Yeah, the
So,
dark side eventually got you. It took a
yes,
little
yes,
bit of time.
yeah, yeah. So,
Amazing.
but that was the first record with all the things that followed that I bought with my own money.
Obviously, you mentioned that kind of kickstarted the metal journey. You got Sabbath, you've got starting to build a little bit of a collection here. So what's the progression? I know it's impossible to like neatly summarize your entire like musical taste history and collecting history, but like how did it in general kind of branch out from there? Were you
Well, I've
focusing
had
on
to
metal primarily
repurchase
at
a
that
lot
time?
of things. I've had to repurchase a lot of things. The cool thing was is I had these albums and I didn't have like my own record player. I had my own record player that was just one of those kind of like Fisher Price, just a lone thing, and that's what I played that Somewhere in Time on in my room. But the reason I brought it back out to my mom's is because she still had a really beautiful setup out there, and I put it in my mom's, record collection. Eventually, I was able to start listening to those records in the living room. She would let me touch it, like let me actually go in there without the fear of me messing everything up. And I kind of took over that main living room stereo system, and I would listen to a lot of her records. And then my uncle Tom, who I grew up around, had an old record collection. First time I ever got my hands on Harvest by Neil Young and Decade by Neil Young, which is like interesting to go from listening to a bunch of metal and stuff like that. Not even a bunch of metal, but just more classic rock. Like, of course, my mom had Led Zeppelin 1 and Led Zeppelin 2 in her collection. So I was able to go and listen to that and get turned on to like the real classic rock sound. I had mentioned Black Sabbath already. Those were in my mom's collection. I was lucky because, a lot of my friends would be like, that's what your mom was listening to. Yes, I'm 46. So my mom was, probably graduated high school in the like, 65, 66 or something like that.
Yeah.
And was like, in her 20s for a lot of the cool music that went on at that time. And she was a musician. My father and my mother met in an off-Broadway touring production of Jesus Christ Superstar.
I did not know
So,
that. Wow.
so like, yeah, well, I got both the Jesus Christ Superstars. I got the movie and I got the one where they did it with Ian Gillan and everything. Like, because it was something that I had to hear a lot as a kid. Like, I don't know. I don't want to go too off the cuff here, but my father was in rock bands. He was in a band called Public Enemy. It's funny, his name's Chuck too. So when Public
Yeah.
Enemy became on my radar as a kid, and I liked to listen to some hip hop through friends, I was like, well, my dad had a band called Public Enemy.
Yeah.
And they would go, "What's your dad's name?" "Chuck." "Oh, now you're messing with me, you know. And I go, "No, I'm not." Late '70s, early '80s, he had a band called Public Enemy, and so I was lucky because and I mentioned my Uncle Tom. Like I got to dig through his records. Really, my record collection grew from taking the hand-me-downs from them and then going buying the newer stuff. But I was at the age where cassettes had taken over, and not too long after, CDs.
Yeah.
So, rewind to maybe, or fast forward, rewind now a lot of years, but fast forward a few years from that 10, 11-year old, and I just started buying CDs, and all these cool records that I got from all these people, I gave away.
Yeah.
I gave them all away. And I have records like original pressings, all these things that I had at that point, and they were hand me downs and stuff. And it really kind of, my Uncle Tom, I remember him saying, "Wait a minute, you gave a lot of those away? Like those were for you, and they were original." And I can understand why he was upset now. Like,
Yeah.
and I want them back, but they're
Yeah.
gone. So, this whole collection, there's probably like 30 or 40% of it that I already had that I had to go back out and get, you
Oh
know,
man. Painful.
reissues or, but so that's kind of my record journey is like getting it as hand me down, like, as hand me down records. My Uncle Tom's records were like, God, it was just chopped, because I had stuff that I heard through my father and my mother, but they didn't have the records anymore, like Cream records or Nick Lowe or all these records that like, kind of started to shape me, you know.
Absolutely, man.
Now the punk and hardcore and all that world clearly came later, like through friends and through my step siblings, and they weren't exchanging vinyl at that point. They were giving away cassettes or tape. I mean,
Yeah.
cassettes or tape, cassettes or CDs, and
Yeah.
so that's how I got turned on to all that stuff. Fast forward, and I'm buying those on vinyl. Buying
Yeah.
those on vinyl even now. Like I didn't have Converge Jane Doe on record when that came out. I had that on CD, and then it was loaded, or the rest of their records loaded onto iPod or Cave
Yeah.
In or bands like that we grew up with, or some of the peers that were either on the same labels or stuff like that, but their records meant the world to me. I had them on CD or they were on MP3 or this, that, and now I buy them on vinyl because, I mean, Brian, I don't know how you feel about it, but there's certain records that I don't know if they transfer as well on vinyl.
100%.
Blood Sugar Sex Magic, super important record to me. I listen to it sometimes on vinyl and I go, there's things I couldn't hear as well, but I think that this album may have sounded the best on CD.
I do the same thing, and I always wonder, is this a mental thing with me? Because that's one of those albums for me too. I mean, I was little when that came out, and I can't picture it on any other format. It seems odd. That's the way
Yeah,
it's supposed to sound to me. There's an interesting
yeah,
psychological component to all this too, I think.
yeah. And I mean, there's certain records like a Misfits record or something like it's not going to make that. You know, not it has its sound, and there's certain things you could pick out when it's on the vinyl, and there were certain things you could pick out when it's on CD. But that sound's not changing that much. You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
um, I think that those records actually do belong. Some of that stuff does belong on vinyl because like the high end of how like raw it was and stuff. Even like the Stooges and shit like that. Like
Yeah.
that high, well, the Stooges was more meant for vinyl. Like if it's in the '70s, that shit was being mixed for vinyl. The early '80s, like what is it, the mid '80s when CD started to become the big thing, right?
Definitely.
So really, if you have something from the '70s or early '80s and it's on vinyl, it's probably going to sound at its peak.
Yeah, I don't know if there is an element of nostalgia, but I always think of it, I want at least my base copy of this, my real like foundational copy of whatever album to be the medium that it was, yeah, like you said, either mixed for or was sort of like of that era. If it's a Black Sabbath album, I want the vinyl. And then it's like, yeah, I'll get the remastered CD or whatever if it's like a album I really love and want to have an extra format. Kind of that's my logic.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, Like the only thing that gets lost that I love having some of the albums too, the things that, for me especially, who was given a name by my good friend Patrick, ADDJ. I'm not an ADDJ when I put on a vinyl. I actually listen to it. Like, I've had gatherings here where I've had people pick out records, and sure, maybe it's going to be hard to be in a party and everybody listens to the full record. If there's 20 people here and they all picked a record, but I've made a rule like we at least choose which side we listen to, and we
Yeah.
listen to it. And if it's a really great one that everybody agrees on, we're listening to the whole record. And in the day of playlist, in this day of playlists and everything like that, you're bound to just bounce around a lot. So I find having my record collection helps me to still want to do the full album experience, which, especially Coheed, but any band or anything I've ever been part of, full album experience is crucial to me.
Totally, man.
And people I know.
Hello. Let's go to the shelf. Forest Green. This is from 1973, self-titled album, American band. They are really interesting. I bought this on a whim at a local store here in Knoxville. I think it was $4 or $5. Was really pleasantly surprised. I didn't really know what to expect. Loved the cover, very trippy. The back image didn't give me a whole lot of confidence, but I decided to take the plunge. It's kind of a jazz fusion meets psychedelic rock meets a little bit of mild prog. There's some brass on here. It's really solid. There's nothing about this that's going to change your life, but I was really pleasantly surprised. This is kind of a lost gem to me. I thought it was interesting that there is a member credited for sound advice. Good way to earn some royalties there. But yeah, you look at the lineup, you see this is just stuff that speaks to me. The keyboardist is playing some Wurlitzer organ, some electric piano, some clavinet, some recorder, two people on woodwinds actually. Again, it's not a perfect album. Certain songs lean a little bit toward the corny side, but when you get down to the actual playing, it's phenomenal. Definitely recommend going online at least and trying to find a sample of it, see if you dig it, and then more importantly, when you see it out in the wild in the stacks, and it probably is going to be $4 or $5, pick it up. If you're into this kind of stuff, you're not going to be disappointed. You mentioned Coheed, and I wanted to ask you about, like record collecting related to the band. A lot of the people that I've talked to for this show so far, they talked about they love to go to record stores on the road or while they're touring. And some people are like, no, I don't do that because it's too hard to transport things. Are you guys collecting? Do you go to record stores when you're out on tour?
We had a moment there, and the bass player Zach Cooper and Claudio too, but and our tour manager Ernie. But Claudio has he has a pretty big collection as well. But Zach probably has more than I do, and he's a big jazz head. But he, like we have a lot of similar taste in a lot of whether it be like 90s alternative and punk and metal stuff. But so, there's a lot of records that that we'd be going on the hunt for the same record. They got one of them, and it would be like, all right, well, you got that one. That's cool. I'll get, but
Yeah.
Especially in the days of reissues, which has been the past 15 years, right? So
For sure.
we had a lot of times where we would come at the end of tour and we would have a box full of records that we would literally ship home.
Yeah.
So that we didn't have to transport them in the airport or anything. And I'm kind of past that right now, which goes back to what I said. I'm in a place where I have this collection of records, and I have some things I still want to rearrange and fix, and maybe not just have the greatest hits and 2 records of Electric Light Orchestra, or 3. I have 3 ELO records that I really loved, and then the greatest hits. So I have the songs off the other albums because I don't need that whole album. Well, I figured out there's a couple of those albums that I do want the whole album.
Yeah.
So how do I make that adjustment? This is crazy talk, I
No,
know,
no,
but
no.
that's
We are
how
on
I
the same
organize.
wavelength.
You know, that's how I organize. So I'm like, well, I have to make room otherwise if I'm going to upsize the yellow and I need to downsize something else that I maybe don't listen to as often. And that's kind of the weird shit that I go through with my record collection. Like, okay, George Harrison, for example. I
Yeah.
wanted this All Things Must Pass record, but they only truly sell it. And I remember even seeing this style, like where it was massive back in the day when parents had it. Shit.
Yeah.
Only, and now it's even bigger than ever because it's the All Things Must Pass and the session outtakes, which is super awesome. And I had one of those with Derek and the Dominoes for Layla for a while there. It was a box set kind of thing like this, but it takes up so much fucking space.
Yes.
And I have that for Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. And I'm down. I love that one. Claudio actually gave me that. But there were certain ones that I had for other bands that I'm like, I don't need. It takes up so much space. Like I
Yeah.
have a Fela Kuti box set, and I was able because it still has the label on it. I'm able to take the records out and I store the box somewhere else. I'm crazy, I know. So I have like so all where is it? All the Fela records are you can see. You can't see any of the spines, but
Can
so
you
they're
pull a
all
couple
right
out?
here.
I'd love to see
It's
some
like
stuff.
it's like so it's this whole section of records from the box set,
Yeah.
but it's not that whole box taking it up. It's just having those five or six records. With Harrison, it's like one of these where you open it up. And they don't have the thing, so you can. It's just sleeves with illustrations on it, but you know, can't
Yes.
just put those in. So if
I
there's
have a
one
lot
thing
of
that I could
storage.
advise to people who create box sets that are this massive for us collectors, sometimes we don't want to have to put that box in there like that. Such an amazing album that fine, it could take up all that real estate.
Yeah.
Melancholy, the Infinite Sadness, such an important record to me. Fine, it could take up all that real estate. I curb my OCD and my attention deficit disorder to let that happen. But as you can see, like it's a lot of just like the standard regular pressings of the album because I don't got room for them box sets.
I know what you mean. I have a few things on my shelf right now that the box is so massive that it can't
I
fit.
see
Yeah.
it. I see it.
You probably know that there's some stuff that's like I have to just lay it horizontally, and I'm like, I don't want to do that, but because it's so sturdy and it's in such a thick box, but like here's this Radiohead thing. It's like
The OK
it's
Computer one.
I've got
Oh,
this
the
like
Kid A one.
it's so big though, but you physically can't fit
Wow.
it. So I have to just lay I've got a little stack of these, but yeah, that drives me crazy. It's one of those things where it's such a beautiful thing. I want to display it correctly and like have it accessible, but yeah, you run into these challenges as a collector.
Yeah, I'm a
You
massive Neil Young fan, so I get the Neil Young Archives box set. I remember I got the first one, and I had that on CD, and I still have it. But I wouldn't store that here. I store them in places, because I don't have the biggest house, so like and I have two kids, so there's nowhere to put them here. So I have a storage unit, and stuff like that will go in there. But like for the Neil Young actual vinyl box set, I mean that thing's like this big, so I'm not putting that in here.
yeah,
Uh, it gets stored. It gets stored if I have it. You know,
it's a lot of real estate.
like for instance, I see the Genesis shirt you have on, right? Like, and
Yeah,
I'm a big Genesis fan. I had like the Genesis box set that was 80 to 80 whatever, like or 70 to 85 or something. That
yeah,
has, and then there were three, and it has the one that has Mama on it, and that's all. Which album?
yeah,
I think that's self-titled, right?
yeah,
Self-titled. So, and Mike, it goes up to Duke maybe, and I had that on CD, and I still have it, but it's in storage. Because what am I going to do with that?
those little cubes. You're talking about the
Yeah,
little.
the cubes.
Those are
And
one of my
so,
favorite things. Yeah.
but for Genesis, I'm not buying that box set on vinyl. I have it, I just have the records themselves here, you know?
I have to ask you,
That's
since
the craziness.
no, trust me, this stuff goes on in my head all the time.
Good, good.
So we have to talk Genesis now because yes, as you can see, they're my favorite band pretty much. I mean, it's way up there. Do you have any Genesis you can pull off the shelf or talk about? I
Yeah.
want to know more about your love of Genesis because I'm a
Okay, so I fell in love with Genesis as a kid, hearing like a lot of things being played by my mom because of like the Phil Collins era more.
yeah.
Though she did love a lot of the Peter Gabriel era. So look, this album, come on, man. Like it's my youth. So
Yeah.
you're not gonna have like, all the cool, Peter Gabriel stuff going on that album. But which one is my favorite Peter Gabriel? Oh,
That's
I must have gotten to see. This is when I hate this. This is making me tingle. Is Here it is. Selling England by the Pound.
oh,
So that's my favorite Peter Gabriel one.
me
Okay,
too, me too.
and my favorite post Peter Gabriel but that's still kind of kooky outside in the progland is and then there were three.
Love it.
Uh, so those are my top because that's still the '70s, and then in the '80s, yeah, come on, like
The perfect album. People shit on that album and it drives me crazy because people
because
like to divide.
it's the pop kind of thing that they're like, or the sellout kind of thing, and it's literally everything about my youth in one record, like kind of like being in my mom's like '85 Mustang and the radio's on, you're gonna hear one of those tunes going, you know.
Oh yeah, man.
So it's, the nostalgia is so heavy on that album that like I have certain songs that like you get that hair stand up feeling when the intro comes on, and Genesis has those songs. I mean, I have songs that like make me feel a wave of emotion, and I'm not embarrassed to say this. And I watched the fucking yacht rock thing the other night, but
I did too. I watched it 2 nights ago. It's funny.
oh, it's sick. And Christopher Cross sailing that intro with the whole string section stuff. I still get like this like overwhelming feeling as many times as I heard that song, as many dentist office, as many, I still feel it like it's just deep. So there's so many songs like that from my youth, and that feeling's important. So Genesis is definitely one of those bands that has so many little sections like that. This one's got a lot of those '80s jams too. That's the one we were talking about. That's
Totally.
and Home by the Sea, and all this. There's still some proggy kind of madness going on, but then you have Mama and
Yeah, they were
that's
just
all.
sprinkling the prog in, you know? It was
Yeah,
like
yeah. They didn't go too nuts yet, but
uh, I love it, man. I appreciate you humoring me with that because yeah, I'm a huge prog guy in general, but also just Genesis
yeah.
is
Look at the Tales. I mean, there's so many great Genesis albums. I like I said, I don't have the box set in here, but I got a bunch of the regular albums.
you may have just answered it without even realizing it. But one thing I think is kind of fun, I ask a lot of people is an album in your collection or albums or whatever that your fans or just people would be surprised that you own. I think Christopher Cross might be on that list, but I don't know if you have anything else you'd want to share with us.
I can't say like I look at things and I'm like, well, people really think that's that weird? Like, I mean, I got some things that people maybe never heard of. Like
Sure,
this
that's
this
interesting
this
too.
is a great record. This is my father listened to this guy as a kid, and I would call him like the Native American Johnny Cash, Floyd Westerman. Have you ever heard of Floyd Westerman?
Never.
Oh, this album in particular, like there's this deep song called well, there's a bunch of them, but there's 35 More Miles. Um, Just check it out at some point. But he's an
Yeah.
actor too. I think he was in Little Big Man with Dustin Hoffman and
Okay.
stuff. And his albums are super hard to find. And he's not on, like, a lot of his stuff is not streaming. Actually, I think he has a record called Floyd Westerman Sings Johnny Cash. Like, his voice has got that deep, But
Yeah.
and again, I don't think that's going to surprise anybody. I mean, I maybe some people would be like surprised how much I do like a lot of, like, especially '90s hip hop. And one of my favorite records that I own, and that was from the '90s, was Gravediggaz, 6 Feet Deep. And I have an original pressing that I wouldn't dare say the name, and it's not me approving of the name, but we're collectors, right? So
Of
I'm
course.
gonna show, I'm gonna show this name up front and just say that I've always been super proud to own it. I'm not gonna dare say the name because it's not for me.
Totally get that. Totally get that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Have you? Did you ever listen to this record when you were
I
young?
don't I don't know that I've ever actually heard that. It's one of those albums I've heard the name 10,000 times. I don't know that I've ever sat down and listened to the full thing.
It was one of my favorites because it was a very role. It kind of fits into the world of talking about like Coheed right now, because it was definitely conceptual, and they called it like horror rap, and a lot of it is just stories,
Yeah.
the songs, and each one of them took on an identity. The Grim Reaper, and it's just super fun. It's like you can't, like, people would talk about how ill it was, but you can't take it that serious because it's supposed to be like story based,
Yeah.
um, but it was fun.
This is maybe a stretch. I don't know. Maybe you do have a good answer for this one, but are there any albums that you own or kind of touch points that you can think like, oh, that may have inspired a guitar track on one of the new songs, or like this vibe that we were kind of channeling on this song, maybe we were kind of leaning toward this. I don't know if there's anything on your shelf that you're kind of like, oh, I can draw a line from that to this.
Well, I could definitely do that, in two ways. So I'm going to pull this, so I do it with
Sweet.
that first, and then I'm going to do it in another way too. I'm going to do it in for this is for me personally, okay?
Yeah.
So, and then I'm going to do it with, um, it's kind of cool to do this. Um, so Claude would appreciate this as well, what I'm doing here. Got it. See, I also organized mine to help me out. Like, Bob Dylan is going to be under B. So's the Beatles, obviously. But
Yeah.
you know, Gene Clark is going to be G. It's their first name.
Interesting.
Danzig's D because Danzig calls himself Danzig. So, funny enough, that is going to be one of the things. So there's a song at the end called So It Goes. And I took a bunch of leads, and I wanted it to be a marriage because Claudio had this song for quite some time, and I heard it, and I always had an idea to add very, like, and he's always been a big fan and always added a lot of Queen sounding guitars to it. And I don't know if you could hear that in there, but there's like a lot of like Queen sounding guitars in
Totally.
there. And we did that together, and we really got the sounds. But I wanted it to be a combination of the Queen sounding guitars, and also have it be very, and even Claude was on this, but very Joe Walsh sound.
Nice.
Like very, I don't know, like
I
he's
love Joe Walsh.
definitely in my top. And then a song called "The Flood." I don't want to be like it's kind of gonna. There's a song that is checked. There's an Easter egg almost, and eventually I don't know if people will find it, but it's a guitar part that is from the first record, and I will look forward to seeing if people pick it out. That is in the song "The Flood," and it's from that record. And if they pick out what song it is, it'll be amazing. And it's also got one that's from this record, because I thought of when Claudio sent me the song "The Flood," especially lyrically, it made me think about him kind of like, you know, that scene in Alice in Wonderland where the door starts crying and then she like floats through and she's like floating through the ocean and a lot of the characters are going by and stuff. And
Yeah.
that's what it reminded me of, but it's Claudio and it's a bunch of Amory Wars and Vax's characters going by him and seeing it. So when he sent me the song to add, like, this is my job to try and like add things that he hasn't thought of already, you know, especially when it's a song that he's had sitting for a while that he wrote. If I can come up with melodies that excite him or heighten the song, then I've done something cool, you know? So for me, I had these little things where I was like, I explained to him that why I thought that the Easter egg kind of thing and checking these songs within the song works. Because we've done that in other ways with like the themes in Coheed and stuff. But I was like, in this one in particular, actually check, like, but they're in a different key, but there's patterns that people will recognize.